Hi everyone, today we're going to be covering list views. For this one, the first thing that you will need to do is to download the template for this example. So you go to Canvas and you will find the list view template. This will contain the following: just a main activity with the boilerplate code, a main activity the layout that only has a text view with the name of the application. You will also have just the string resources in there, and the first thing that we're going to be doing is adding a list view. So you can just come here to the palette, say list view, drag and drop, fix the constraints, and just add the spacing as needed for it to have a little bit of space just so it looks a little bit better. I will also resize the bottom part just a little bit. There. Feel free to pause the video and anytime if you need to a little bit more time to do these changes. For the second part is that when you add a list view, it will not have an ID generated automatically, so just add an ID to that list view. So the second part, and is what we're going to be working on, is on the code. So unlike other views and widgets, you cannot add data directly like you do with the edit view, that you can just put the data here on the XML rather than do it more programmatically. For the list view, you can only do the data linking programmatically. The reason for this is that the list view takes a resource that you defined in your code and maps it into a view that is going to be the list view. Now the first thing that we're gonna do is do what we did last time, just create a reference to our list view by creating a global variable and then looking up that variable and initializing it after the layout has been created, just as we did with all the other buttons and widgets. Now for this one, we're gonna be covering three things. First one, we're gonna be covering the populating of the list view. I have some boilerplate code. So first we're going to be covering how to populate it using a string resource. Then we're using a data array. That is going to be an array of objects that we use to populate the list view. And lastly, we're going to see how to do some event handling on the list view. So first we're going to start with a string resource. For this one, we're going to first create an array string over here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start it here. So where it's gonna be a string array, it's gonna be the content. We're gonna have to get the resources. We're gonna get a string array, and the string array is gonna be an ID r.array.breathes. Now notice this error is saying that you don't have a symbol array called breathes. That basically means that right now in your resources you don't have a string resource array called breathes. So you can simply click here, that will let you create it. It will create it automatically here. Now I'm going to populate it. Fortunately for me, I already have a pre-made list of it. So I'm just gonna use that one. You will have to type it. So remember, for a string array, you give it a name and then you list each item within the item element. So this will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 elements in our string array. However, in my case, Android Studio is still giving me the error that it doesn't exist. So when I click it again, it will literally create a duplicate and that will give you an error. So this happens because Android Studio is not recognizing the array string resource properly. no matter if I create it on arrays.xml or strings.xml. So for now, we're just gonna ignore it. We're just gonna compile to see that it runs fine. Right now, we will see no changes on the UI because all that we did is add the widget and just initialized an array in our source code, but nothing has been done on the UI side. As you can see, it looks just empty. Because now what we have to do is link this string content to our list view. Now, it is not as straightforward as simply saying when we use a text view, that we have a text view dot set text. So we're going to do the equivalent of that, but it's not as easy. We have to use something called an array string adapter. So with list views, you have adapters that basically take in the array of objects that you want to transform into the view. Now first, we have to create an adapter, so we're gonna use an array adapter. So this is going to be adapter. Now, one thing that we have to specify when we create an adapter is the type. So here we have that is going to be an adapter for an array of type string. So this is an array string. Now an array adapter takes more than just the content that you want to specify. So when you're creating an array adapter, you will have to specify a couple things. Number one is going to be the context that you want to use. Number two is going to be the layout that you want to use to draw each individual item into the list. So if we go here, a list view is going to take each element in our array and is going to be mapping it into a particular view or a particular layout into our UI. So the first thing that we need to do is give it the context. The context in this case is going to be this, which is our application context, just as we have done before with the different applications that we have, that this is going to be just the instance of the current activity that is running. Afterwards, we need to pass in the layout that we want to use for each element in the adapter. Now we're just gonna use the one of the boilerplate codes or layouts given by Android. So this is going to be android.r.layout, and this is going to be the simple. Oh, let me just fix that. Layout. Simple list item one. So there's a lot of other boilerplate pre-made layouts. If you click on it, you can see the layout that is given. So all it has is just a little text view. So every single element in our array is going to be mapped into this text view. And that's it. And then the last element on our array adapter is going to be the content itself. Now, for it to be actually drawn, we have to do the same thing that we did with the event listeners, and it's that we have to register the adapter to our list view. So we have to our list view variable, and then we're going to set the adapter to be the one that we just created. This is basically saying when you're rendering this list view, use this adapter, and this adapter is taking this content string and transforming it into a view using this layout for each element. Now we're going to compile it and see what it looks like on our app. Now, unlike other things that we've done up to this point, you will see that the only way to see whether it works or not is to actually run the app, because these changes are not going to be reflected here. So as you can see, we have one element in our list, and we can scroll down. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, that basically fits the whole screen. But each one of these is one element in our string array, as you can see. Now, if you want to make it a little bit bigger of an array, I'm just going to add some more elements here. What can I do? I'm just gonna add just these ones that are different. Then we're gonna have to just apply changes. Now in this case we could just apply the changes because the changes were not significant enough. There were just some changes to the resources, so there's no need to recompile the application. All you need to do is basically tell the application that the background resources have been updated. So if you can see, you'll have a scrolling on the list view. We don't have to say in the activity main, oh, surround this by a scroll view, because it is already baked in into the list view. Okay, so that's the easiest way to deal with creating a list view. However, this relies on you having a predetermined set of items on the background to use. In most scenarios, you will not have this case. You will have a list view. If you've ever used Spotify, you have a similar to a list view that is showing you the list of songs. And those songs are drawn in from somewhere else. Maybe it's a database, or maybe it's some other sort of external resource, or you can just create it on runtime. So what we're going to be doing next is going into a different method to populate this element using a string. No, using instead of a string resource, just using an array of custom objects. So the first thing that we're going to do for this to work is going to create a new Java class to represent our model. We're going to call it the pet class. I am just creating it inside of some model sub folder here that I have. And a pet is going to have a couple elements. So we're going to have a name. It's going to have a breed. And it's going to have an age. Now we're going to generate some constructor for it. If you're not familiar with Java, I would recommend writing these methods manually just to practice, but this is just a little bit faster. So I'm just gonna generate getters for the name. That's all that I need. So these elements are private unless specified otherwise. So that's why I don't write whether it's private or public, because they will be private unless I tell them that they are public. It's private. Now you can just do it explicitly. So I'm just gonna do it explicitly so there's no doubts that they are private. Okay. Now the way this works is that right now the only way to set the breed and age is by using the constructor. Okay. Now we have that. So what we're gonna do next is create an array of these elements. So it's going to be, I like to use linked lists just because they tend to have better performance than a single array list. This is of type pet list, and this is going to be a new linked list. Now here we have to import the class pet into our main activity, and that's it. Now we have to populate the data. You can do this in several ways. Right now, since we don't have any sort of backend or running array to use, we're just gonna initialize it directly in the code. So we're just gonna hard code, put a few pets in here. Feel free to add more if you want. Let's call it pets as I had it before in my code. Okay. Afterwards, we're gonna be doing something similar. We're just gonna create an array adapter in here, but instead of a string, this time it's gonna be of type pet. It's gonna take elements of the class pet and put them inside of the same type of structure. So this is called pets rather than content. ListView set adapter, adapter2. Okay, perfect. Now we're just gonna change the selection to, because right now we will be using the method using data array. So it will be populated using this information. So let's go ahead and run it. That's not what I wanted. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I have 6 things. Pet, blah, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, as you can see, we have 6 things. If you're not familiar with Java, you're probably wondering, wait, what is this thing? If you look at it closely, this is the name of the package, the name of the class, and this is the ID. So this is effectively just the address in memory where this object is stored. So the way this array adapter works is that they will have just a simple list item. So all they have is just a text element, so an edit text view, as we saw before. And what it's doing is it will convert every element into a string and put that in here. Now the way Java objects work is that they all have this particular method called the toString method. And this one is the one that is being used. So when you don't have this overridden, all that you will return is the address in memory of the object. That's what it will return. And that's why we're seeing these particular things here. So we can override the toString method to show what we want. So we can have the name. So this must return a string, so I'm just gonna do it like this. String. And then have the name plus the breed plus the age. The name. I'm just doing a really simple formatting for this. So name, breed, age. This should do the automatic conversion, but if it doesn't, we will fix it later. So let's run it once again. Okay, as we can see now, it is using the value that is being returned here. So let's go back to our data array and compare it. As you can see, there's a one-to-one correspondence in the order and it's the correct data. Now the last thing that we can see is that each item in the list view can be clicked, but right now they don't do anything. As you remember, we have to manually tell our app what to do when a user clicks on something. So for this, we're going to use an event handler. Now, unlike a simple button, we cannot use just an on-click listener. We're going to use the equivalent of it, but is called something different. So it's going to be ListView on item click. So if we just use an on-click listener, it will trigger um, just when anything on the view is clicked, but it will have no notion of whether I clicked this one or this one. It will just know that I clicked somewhere inside the text view, inside the list view, I mean. So this is going to be a new on-click listener, you know, list view dot on-click listener. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and look at this one. So when you're dealing with an on-click on item click listener, the most important thing that you have to keep in mind is that you will have 4 different attributes in your event handling. So this is going to be a little bit of a longer code, so I'm just gonna bring it up from here. Oh, I'm using the wrong one. After view. There needs to be an adapter view. We're just using the base one rather than the list view because that way we can actually manipulate the items more easily. Okay, so we call it list listener, and then we have a couple things that we get here. So this is the method that we are going to use on item click. So that means that every time an item is clicked on our application, such as this one, we will do something. Now, the second part that we get is the parameters. So we have a couple parameters that we're going to be looking at. We have the parent, which is going to be effectively the adapter itself. That way we can have access to the underlying data. The second one is going to be the view. This is going to be each of these little views that we're using to render the information in the UI. Then the position of the element that was clicked and a unique ID for that element. So what we're gonna be doing is just something very simple. We're just gonna create a toast. Right now we can use make activity.this, as you remember. That is because we are right now inside of this new instance of on-click listener rather than the main activity. So we're just explicitly saying go to the main activity and get the context of that. We could also use the get application context method, which will effectively do the same thing, but instead of manually saying what the context is gonna use the current context in the application, which in this case is gonna be the same as saying main activity.this. Now let's create a string. Here, let's call it message. And in this message, what we're gonna be printing is just selected the, we're gonna say which element was selected. And then we're gonna get some data from it. So here is gonna be the value. Okay. So all that we're gonna be doing here is printing a toast that has as a message the item that was selected, its position, and the value. So for value, what we're going to do is use the parent here. So what we have to do is basically say that we're going to get an object of type pet, current pet, and this is going to be get item at position, and we give the position that we're getting, and that will give us the information. Now, if you can see, you see that here is telling us that current pet is of type pet, but here the parent.getItem at position is just returning an object. So we have to do an explicit casting and saying that the object that we're retrieving is going to be a pet. And then here we can use this variable that contains the element of that position and just access its underlying data. And that's why we have the getName method. Now quite effectively what we're doing is get the adapter, get the item at the position that was clicked, explicitly stating that that item is of type pet, which is the one that we have here, and sending that into this particular variable. Then we're using that variable to access the data. Now here we're having this little missing semicolon bracket. Okay, perfect. Now let's go back and run our application. Okay, and nothing happened. Okay, now just take a couple seconds, pause the video, and try to figure out why it didn't work. Okay, you're back. So, if you didn't figure it out, that's okay. Just remember that just creating a listener by itself doesn't do much. You have to actually register the listener to the widget that you want to be listened for. So as you can see here, this object is never used. So you just have to do the same thing that we did with the button listeners. Come here, use your ListView variable, and just use the corresponding method to set the on item click listener. Just make sure you choose the corresponding listener to this one, and then just pass in the variable that we created up here. Once that's done, run your app once again, and let's see what happens. Perfect. Now let's click on this one, see the second element. Now let's just look at this one. This is the second, but it's the third. So the thing that happens here is that this is going to be indexed using the position the same way that an array will be. This is the 0 position, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So if you want to keep exploring this, you can simply make the change over here on how you will fix that and say, okay, this is the first one, second one, third one, fourth, fifth, and sixth element. Okay, so that should be everything for you today, and that's it. Thank you.